So instead of doing one big video talking about lost records, considering that I tried to shake things up this year and normally break apart my big videos into like three separate videos, some of them will vary in length, obviously. I thought it made sense to do the same with lost records this time around, considering that there are different subjects to cover when it comes to this game. And it's an idea that I've also been keeping in mind towards maybe even making other videos and topics in the future to go this road instead of just making big video. As much as I do like my big videos, the time limit, or yeah, the time tends to vary between basically 30 minutes all the way to like over an hour. And I really enjoy those. It's just not practical to make those specific types of videos because not everybody's going to watch them, or at least watch them all the way through. But that being said, I thought to kick off the talking about this game done right was to make a video covering the misconceptions about the game. So in this video, I will not be talking about the game really itself. I will be like kind of skirting around like the description of the game and public details that you would know if you either look up the Wikipedia or uh, just looked up the description on the PlayStation Store, something like along those lines. And the reason for that is because I do plan to go in depth in every other video, but because this video isn't necessarily dedicated specifically to the game, but talking about the criticisms about the game and kind of denouncing them, a lot of this video will be opinionated, and I've decided to save the most important topic for last. That topic will get political, and as much as I don't want to get political, the overall problem with that topic stands or comes from a certain group of people. I won't be talking about any like political figures or anything like that, but if you're familiar with the term grifter, I'll be going over grifters and more specifically how th their criticism just doesn't make sense, and it will also affect another topic that I will cover before that, which is talking about watching videos and stuff about the game before going into it. And yeah, anyways, but let's get started and cover some of the criticisms I saw in comment sections. This one was like more specifically, I think I only saw it like once, and it's still one of the dumbest criticisms that I see when it comes to these games, is that people still have not accepted, and I'm not going to say all people, but there are types of people that still have not accepted this genre as a gaming genre. Some people call them walking simulators, other people will just say that they're like visual novels, but it takes away the overall importance from these games when you call them that. Like it's every game genre has a purpose, has a specific thing that you do in that game, whether it be a sandbox open world game, whether it be a racing game, whether it be a shooter, whether it be an RPG. They all have their elements that make up the genre. When it comes to story-driven based, choice-based games, I'm just going to call them that. Yes, there isn't a whole lot of gameplay, but the whole meat and potatoes of the game are the choices that you make, are the characters that you meet, and how the story unfolds from the decisions, or how basically the game progresses with whatever. Not every game is done through choice-based systems, specifically like Lost Records, but Lost Records is a game that you're spent the whole most of the game pretty much getting to know the characters. Most games that are done in this similar format are always done through like choice-based decisions, and whatever choice you get or you choose. Sometimes there are multiple endings. Life is Strange is one of those where that's what people normally associate choice-based games with, other than maybe the Telltale games, and of course Detroit Become Human, as well as Heavy Rain. But it still just doesn't make sense to just completely discredit a genre just because there's not a whole lot to do in it. If you play an open world sandbox game and all the stuff that you do in that game, well, yeah, story wise, it's gonna make you feel like you made a difference because, oh, you took out those outposts, you liberated those towns, but you don't feel that real sense of accomplishment unless the game is delivered the of that sense of accomplishment. If you like, if you like, oh, because you did all this, even when a character says, oh, because you did all this, like we're gonna win this fight, we're going to conquer this province, you unless the game like has that, um, presentation that presents that, often or not, when you blow stuff up, when you kill people, it just feels like it's just part of the overall nature of having fun with the game. When you play a game like a story-based, story-driven, choice-based game, those games are built on the decisions you make or just the overall experience that you get from meeting these characters and going along with the story. And it still does, I still don't understand why people discredit that genre as a whole, because it's all about the, a lot of people that enjoy video games for for the most part, it's either gameplay or story. And if you have a great story, great characters, I feel like that's just like one of the quintessential parts you need to have a great video game. Why discredit a video game that focuses on those quintessential parts? But that being said, the other bits that I wrote down kind of just fall in line with each other. The first one is that the pacing is a bit slow, or just the game is overall slow in general. And then the other one is that the story offers nothing. So, again, these kind of go in hand with what I already said. Um, I will say that if you are not fully invested into I basically, what is it, a 7 hour, 6 hour experience, just getting to know the characters, and then the story develops the last bit, then you might need to break up your playtime in parts. If you're just going to shotgun through this, you're going to probably leave this game with a negative review because you're just focused on getting to the end, which makes sense why some people say that, oh, a lot of people are saying that this game isn't as good as Life is Strange, or this game isn't Life is Strange, because it was never supposed to be. Life is Strange is a game where as much it's quick, it's straight to the point. Yes, there's choice-based decisions and all that, but the story continues to move on through. This game, some people say, like, slogs, you gotta like do what is like the first hour, you get to know your main character a little bit, and then you meet the other characters, and then that's when the story starts progressing. That's what people are saying, it gets slow, which it does. It makes sense. um, and I do feel like it is a fair criticism to say that yes, it is slow. It's kind of annoying that you don't really meet the characters until you're over an hour into the game. That is a little bit annoying, but at the same time, if you didn't have that another experience, getting to know your main character, maybe you would just like the other characters except for your main character a bit more than, and that's obviously not the point that the creators of the game want you to they don't want you to feel that way. The other thing that I also wanted to talk about is that every game, even within this genre, has their own thing to it. They have their own reason why people come back to these games or will play these games in the first place. And it's never right, even if it is by the same studio, to compare a game like this to basically the game that put the studio on the map. And there's a discourse between people that are genuinely not educated and don't know that like Don't Nod doesn't really own Life is Strange, or Don't Nod doesn't own Life is Strange anymore. And some people just think, well, like, why didn't they just make another Life is Strange game? Because they can't. That's why Deck Nine is making Life is Strange. And then there's also a discourse where it's like, well, if they didn't just do the same thing, or why didn't they just do the same thing again if it got them out of the gutter? If you didn't know this, the when Don't Nod made Remember Me basically almost bankrupted their studio. But then whenever they put out Life is Strange saved their studio. And currently, even though Don't Nod has released like or worked on like 7 games, released I think 7 or 8 games, they need that hit to get them back and survive. Otherwise, they have to resort to going to other companies for financial support or just support in general um, to work on projects and etc. That's why that's why it's very important that people who support Donut and love Life is Strange to get this game and support this game and encourage people to get this game because without Donut, we can get into another whole segment of why Donut's important, but without Donut, like that's a crucial company that had inspired a lot of great games, even not even from their studio. Like for example, Heavy Rain was a game that was basically mid, if I remember correctly. It was reviewed with a mid score rating, but it became more popular because it was either memed on or people that genuinely did like it, which I don't know if it would be considered a cult classic. I think it would be. Um, that wasn't enough to get their studio to make Detroit Become Human. You could also argue Telltale. I don't know I do feel like um, Telltale is definitely responsible for more games to come out that were story based, choice based driven, because then that's when Life is Strange came out. But Life is Strange to this day, I would say that, yeah, probably both Life is Strange and Telltale, Walking Dead are both responsible for the drive for studios to make more of those games in that genre just because of the popularity and success that they got from those games. But nowadays, it's like if it's not nowadays a lot of people don't even know what they want. A lot of people will kind of just want to rehash the past or something new that still feels familiar. And again, I'll talk more about that, but like right now, probably one of the most hyped things is the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 remaster or remake, which is a remake of games that already existed, not a new Tony Hawk game that has new fleshed out formula. No, they want to play what they've already played back then, just upscaled in a different engine. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we could argue about like remakes and remasters and what's considered a new game, what's considered just ports or whatever. But I still feel like if people are so comfortable with just wanting to play the past, then a lot of people are not willing to try something new. And it doesn't matter what reviewers say. If people wanted Life is Strange, they would play Life is Strange. But some people were misinformed about what Lost Records was, so they either they got the game, they didn't like it, or they didn't bother getting the game for a couple reasons. The full game isn't out yet, as well as if it's not Life is Strange, I don't want it. And even I remember seeing one YouTuber specifically that said, Life is Strange, but this is not it. Yeah, exactly. It's not Life is Strange. If you would have went into the game knowing what it was, which it wasn't Life is Strange, you wouldn't be disappointed, and you wouldn't have even had to put that in the damn video. But that being said, I feel like I covered those two topics well enough that we can move on to the last thing before we get to the important topic, which is cringe. And I decided to not include one specific part because I feel like it falls in line with this. And I'm going to say this right out the gate. Coming from someone that has covered Life is Strange on this channel, really just recently, putting out a video talking about my relationship with the series, playing almost all the games except for Life is Strange 2, as well as making a music project, a non-copyright music project dedicated to replacing the copyrighted music for people to use whenever they decide to play the game and, like replace music in VODs or whatever. Um, as well as a heavy supporter for Don't Nod, as well as just Lost Records in general, that I'm going to say it, this fan base, for the most part, is cringe. The fan base for the original Life is Strange and even just Life is Strange in general is cringe. But the word cringe has lost its meaning so long ago that at this point it doesn't really make sense to even use the word. But some people are still using that word to describe Lost Records. So this is what I'm going to say. When when any piece of media applies to outcasts, people that are different in all sorts of life, especially people that, have either mental health issues, people have past trauma that relate to that specific media, I don't fault anybody for it. If you want to show your love for something, show your love for something. And I will say that from an outsider's perspective, or trying to relate to an outsider that sees a content that gets posted by the fans of that specific media, they might be turned off by it, or they might just be like, I don't know about this. Like, my friend, I remember one time, or my ex-friend, posted a story saying like, man, I really want to get into BoJack Horseman, but the fan base is so cringe. And I always thought about that. Some people are turned off or don't want to check out something just because they see the reaction that their fan base has and they don't want to get invested. For me, I don't really like to get into fandoms, but it's like if for newcomers that want to get into this stuff, it's a mixed bag. It's either something that they will think too much about or they just won't think about it. And for me, I didn't think about it, but I know just from a glance at looking at the stuff to come out about this game, people will probably be drawn away from it. I decided to watch videos of people covering Lost Records after I played it. And I know for a lot of people nowadays in social media, some people will choose to watch the videos or watch people play the game before they pick it up, which is kind of stupid when it comes to story-driven based, choice-based games, because that defeats the whole purpose of getting invested in an experience like that. So, but I'm going to say that even watching videos afterwards, I would say that the game was less enjoyable to watch because it's slow in the beginning, or it's just slow in general. It's one of those experiences that if you don't have your headphones on and you're not making the decisions, what's the point of watching it? And that I do feel like that some people might walk away with that perspective on the game just for that alone. I I'm glad that I experienced the game firsthand, and it still has an effect on me to this day. Which again, I'll cover more about that in other videos. But it makes so much sense nowadays that everybody consumes so much social media that and depending on which content you watch, both sides really, people that are against the game and people that are for the game might not make you want to play the game. Um, but I do like some creators that I would like recommend, especially like when Jedro plays this game, guaranteed I will watch the whole thing because he's fun. He has a fun personality. Some of the people that cover these games are either boring or annoying. That's no hate towards people that actually, love the game, love Donod, love um, those types of games in general. Um, but like, watching whoever play a game is very specific, and Jetro is just like the perfect combination for story-based driven choice-based games because he manages to mix in humor with the overall empathetic nature of going into something that he knows like he can relate with, and he also understands that people relate with this stuff. And that brings us to the most controversial part of the video, which is the overall negative discourse that don't don't care about the game. They don't want to play the game, and they are kind of inciting people not to play the game, not to buy the game, which is just straight up wrong. And I'm going to start off by going over a little bit of history, but I grew up, I remember the early to mid 2000. Well, yeah, I remember like really early to all the way to like late 2010s YouTube. I was there whenever it shifted between like having unhinged content towards having content that was more, the adpocalypse and all that. So I remember the drastic change in content. But a lot of people, everybody brings this up, is that YouTube used to be about yourself making content. But because of how social media has shifted nowadays, a lot of people just do whatever gets them views, gets them likes, even if that means pretending to hate something. Now, the one thing that I remember well, not fondly, remember very negatively was when someone would basically make videos. Well, there were a lot of people that would make videos bullying other people on the internet, and I would say that was one of the points where the internet was going to be going downhill because they see how much views, how much negativity got fueled by people making videos attacking other people, that it made so much sense that whenever the political change of the internet started happening, uh, I would say probably 2015-ish, was to make political channels, making political content, and somehow later down the road, that got infested into attacking media in ways that at the start it used to be like, SJW content. It would be like a feminist didn't like this thing in a video game, so they made a video, talking about or like hating on it or whatever, and then someone make a video basically saying that that person was stupid. And I would argue that that was fine. In the days that was fine. And I do find it kind of ironic, but also a little not fair that back in those days people would just say that it was stupid for someone to say like, oh, they have to change this video game because of this. And I agreed with that. And I still agree with that. I think that if someone takes something that has already been established and changed it just to suit a certain audience, I think that's wrong. And people would call that woke, or I guess DEI now. But there's a difference between that and then just having content that represents that. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to criticize a game like Lost Records because it is doing something, it's doing its own thing. And nowadays it just doesn't matter if you either make content or sorry, if you make media that represents a certain thing or you change something that's already existed and put something that doesn't belong in it. Those same people that hate one thing are going to hate the other thing. And I started questioning this like, you know, I don't know about you, but I feel like when everybody was growing up as kids, we a lot of people were told like, you can like your own thing, but don't shame other people for it. But with the political climate now and everything, it's been shift towards one side likes one thing, the other side likes the other thing. And I don't feel like that's fair. It's even when people would make fun of you for liking a specific thing, it was never it was never like fueled by an ideology to get other people to hate this thing. It was done for content or entertainment purposes where, yeah, it would probably negatively affect the person that was being made fun of, but at the same time, it was never fueling a hateful rhetoric where we would start attacking certain people for certain things. Yes, there were unhinged people that would are part of those fan bases that would threaten, dox, and post their own negative things about the things that people would or that those channels would cover, but it's not that anymore. Nowadays it's just broken up into two political sides where it's even harder to distinguish whether or not someone's being genuine or not. And this goes for both sides because I've witnessed it. I feel like in general, if someone attacks this game for having just uh, female teenage girls and the main character's fat, but they're not playing the game and they don't know anything that's happening in that game, you're basically reviewing something you know nothing about. You're just attacking it from the visual lens and you're probably applying your own you're applying opinions that are either genuinely fueled by your hateful rhetoric or you're just pretending to hate this thing and fuel the people that are watching this video the idea that this is bad, you should hate this, you should be glad that this fails. And so the thing is that I actually made a video before people would make their videos talking about, the gaming industry sucks now, or the decline of modern gaming or whatever. I did make a video that was similar to that. And I actually stole from two grifters. I stole comments from The Quartering and I stole comments from Melanie Mack when I made that video. Because was under the impression that I bought into that stuff, and it was never just like, oh, this thing is new, this thing is like whatever, it will fail or it won't fail, and but I thought more in lines with the one thing that I do agree with, which is taking something that already exists and changing it to fit a certain demographic. I never knew that that those people hated both of those things. I thought it was just the one and the other one was fine. No. I don't know if that was like around 2021, 2023. That was about 2023 that I made that video and that I was consuming that content. But when I realized that like there's just more hate from these people that were actually or that would actually make videos on real political issues and not just specifically media that's quote unquote woke or not. I know that some of my friends bought into this garbage, and I feel like it's they don't know any better, so what's the point of trying to twist that? Unless they mention it to me like, hey, this thing sucks. I heard a video that this thing is garbage, whatever. Then I'd be like, no, because I've experienced this. I've watched it. I remember the hate and backlash towards The Little Mermaid with the black actress. I watched it and I thought it was good. I thought it was a pretty good story because I didn't remember the overall. I didn't remember the old cartoon, but I thought the movie was great. The only reason why people would make videos attacking it was because the actress was black. And that brings me to discrimination. Discrimination as a whole, in terms of woke and DEI, I feel like there's when it comes to political stories, that could make sense. You can attack something for that, but attacking for representation of race, sexuality, religion, like what are we doing at that point? We can have these story, unless again, I'll say it before and I'll say it again, unless we're changing the history and lore of something that already exists. For example, Life is Strange Double Exposure, a story that was already developed and finalized in the first game. They decided to ruin the entire legacy in Double Exposure by a studio that was not Don't Nod, it was Deck Nine. They took the character from the first game, severed the relationship between your soulmate that you met in the first game, or like the person that you were very good friends with for a long time. Friendship faded, came back, and built up that relationship with through thick and thin, through almost through the end of a friggin' town. Um, all the point, all the or just to introduce a new, entirely new love interest that was more really just a rewritten version of Steph. And Steph is a fantastic character. They have a whole separate book talking about her story. She was a well-written character and basically a badass. The character that they introduced in that game was just cute. She was very bubbly, but no one that Max would ever go for. So in that regard, that's a perfect example of something that doesn't work. And I'm fine with calling that woke. I'm fine with that calling that game specifically woke because they got rid of entire storyline, a crucial aspect of the first game's story to tell a whole new story that just didn't make sense. And the characters in that game felt way more they were not as well written. Actually, well, this kind of just goes for Deck Nine in general, but characters in Life is True Colors as well as Double Exposure, unless we're counting Steph, who was an already made character in Before the Storm, so I feel like we shouldn't even count Steph. All those characters didn't have anything interesting to them, except for Gwen. Gwen was really the only interesting character in Double Exposure. The other characters were just seemed like they were written for NPCs, written to be NPCs, and there wasn't a whole lot of thought. There wasn't a lot of the acting felt forced, and it just didn't feel right to me. So that takes us back to like now. Some people that are attacking this game are either, as far as I know, are just pretending to hate it to fuel a hateful rhetoric. Um, like the that it just doesn't. If you if you go into the game with blind expectations, you'll probably leave the game satisfied instead of listening to someone, whether it be a person that's pretending to hate the game or even just a reviewer that just wanted to speed run the game and was originally planning on getting a Life is Strange game, but then they just decided to attack it because it was too slow. They would rather play Life is Strange over this game. In those regards, I didn't want to come off as someone that's like, oh, I know what Don't Nod does, and you don't understand Don't Nod, because a lot of people tend to get Life is Strange and Lost Records mixed up with the way they're telling their stories. People are focused on the wrong things about those stories. And I really, really, really want to try so hard not to spoil anything. But because if they take that, they add like three different things that that you can focus on in a game. For Life is Strange, we have Max's powers, we have the storm, and we have Jefferson. If you take those things, only one thing that you're supposed to focus on, and it's the one thing that I didn't mention, and that's Max's story. I guess you could argue the storm's important because the storm is part of Max's story, but where Max got her powers doesn't matter, and Jefferson is a side story. In Lost Records, there are two things I would say that matter, and you can find them in the trailer or probably the description, which is the box that represents something from 1995. I think it was like 27 years later, and the abyss. I think it's called the abyss or the void, and the void. Those two things. But then there's also then there's also a storyline that I'm not mentioning. So then there's those two things, and there's the storyline. Now, some people are theorizing that the void is a symbol of something that is crucial to the story, and rather than just a supernatural event in general, kind of like a movie like Enemy. And I think that that's a healthier way of looking at the way the story's portrayed. So going back to the one thing I do want to go back to is that, the people that expected or a Life is Strange game having different expectations of what a Life is Strange game is supposed to be, because some some people that I've have a lot of beef with is Kind of Funny Games for saying that they would rather play Life is Strange True Colors over Lost Records. And Life is Strange True Colors, if I may remind you, and from my playthrough, is one of the most useless experiences I've ever had, because they just rewrote the same story. They took a similar plot line, if not the same plot line from the first game, as well as just they didn't care about what they did with True Colors outside of Steph. Steph was the main character was a cool character, but the characters, the world, everything, the whole story fell short. And what Kind of Funny Games is saying is that they just want a murder mystery story with a character with superpowers that's quickly paced, or that's like more quick paced, instead of a slow burn story where you get to know the characters and you see how the story unfolds. There's a lot of things about that review that really ticked me off, but probably the biggest one was that when they said that if there wasn't a tape 2, I wouldn't be disappointed. And that really like got me thinking, like, when I thought back to how people hated video game journalists, and sometimes I just genuinely hate journalists in general. Anybody that makes a top 10 list that gets posted on my Google page, I'm angry at, and almost all the time. And when a gaming journalist says something like, like, oh, I love Life is Strange 1, but if the whole company just stopped, like, I'm fine with all the games they released. I don't want to see any more, or I don't want to see any more games that get released by Don't Nod. I'm like, why are you even a fucking journalist? This is why I hate video game reviewers, because when someone says something like that, it's like, you shouldn't have a job. When you say the quiet part out loud, which is like, oh yeah, I like this, but I don't like this. But you don't think about the negative consequences of saying those things. And when you put a review score, for example, Lost Records is not a 6 out of 10 game. The amount of effort, work that was put into making this art um, is like is highly substantial, above double exposure. Basically, I would argue just basically above everything except Before the Storm and the first Life is Strange game. That it should be a breath of fresh air to experience something that's familiar but something new. But what I got from that review is that they just want another Life is Strange game from Deck 9 instead of Don't Nod. And that's one of those like criticisms where it's like I feel like a good majority of reviewers that reviewed the game in that 6 out of 10 and lower rating just want Life is Strange and they're not willing to try anything new. And it's kind of ironic because I mentioned like grifters and all that stuff that basic and even just the overall response nowadays in terms of gaming that people just want something old or something that feels familiar is that they don't want anything new. And even when there is something new, a lot of the time it just gets trashed on. And it's funny because it's either trashed on for a stupid reason or it's trashed on because people aren't willing to give new something new a chance. And those are my overall final thoughts of the misconceptions and I guess criticisms towards Lost Records. Um, I know this is going to be a really like sporadic video, and it's going to be highly edited because there were parts where I just like, geez, like there's just so much to say about these things, but I also don't want to keep repeating myself. That being said, though, my ideas for videos that I would like to cover in the future for Lost Records is how this game impacted me, as well as talking about. Oh no! Now I remember. I remember. Had it at the I had it in my head and it was on the tip of my tongue, but it came back to me. The one criticism, another criticism that I wanted to mention that falls in line with like back to whatever I said about the different things to interpret about this game. My interpretation and a lot of other people's interpretation is that this game is kind of, if not really just kind of said by the creator, is that the game is done in a way of like nostalgia fragments. And some people were focusing too much on this game doesn't represent the 90s, even though they're forgetting the most important part of it, which is that no, this is the nostalgic aspect that Donut's known for. There's a nostalgic aspect of Life is Strange that people tend to, and even someone made a very good video on it that they actually compared it to Twin Peaks, was that it's the positive and negative aspects of nostalgia. And this game kind of took it to heart because the first tape is called Bloom, and it's very dreamy atmosphere because it's recounting nostalgic moments from the main character, as well as it's being talked about by the other characters too. Whenever they get the adult versions of them get introduced, in a way that's it's like you're revisiting memories from what you remember specifically, or what the other characters remember, what they're telling you, and that's what's being played out. Now, something that I thought about, and I want to do a whole other video on, is the music specifically, because people say that the overall soundtrack, and I have a lot of opinions about this, is something that doesn't reflect the 90s. But then I start thinking about like, how do I talk about this? If you're making a specific game set in a specific timeline where you could use nostalgia to your advantage. And this game, it was also taught. I heard it was mentioned by some people, where it's like it's teetering on the edge of pandering, but it's not fully pandering. And that's what I respect about the game. But when you take a game like Lost Records and you add this dreamy aspect, this dreamy nature of it, that really reflects the overall tone and message and representation of nostalgia in this game, you have a fully put together art piece that the everything fits. Like Before the Storm, they have this faded nostalgia kind of death of youth vibe to the overall sound. If you listen to a song like No Care, the song No Care, even though No Care wasn't specifically written for Life is Strange Before the Storm, it highly represents Chloe's personality as well as the fuck authority, I'm doing things my own way, as well as feeling bad about the overall feeling bad about the consequences of those actions afterwards. And when you listen to the amazing, beautiful theme for this game, it doesn't matter without you, you know? Nothing matters if you're not here. And for someone that, and for a lot of people that, used to cling on to that stuff and even they still do cling on to that stuff, but they're not actively voicing their feelings, is when you enjoy something that makes you feel better about loss. It seems like nowadays that's just being like, no, we're gonna shame you for it. We're gonna shame you for listening to something that that voices the feelings that you can't voice yourself. And even more specifically, we're going to say that no one wants stuff like this, which is bullshit. Media represents it all the time. Music represents it all the time. There's still stuff that reflects these issues, but just because they had female teenagers and your character's fat, no one would want to buy this game. No one would want to enjoy a game that clearly represents moments that people have been through of all kinds. Doesn't matter what political spectrum you're on. Doesn't matter what you identify as. It doesn't matter what is a part of your own character. You have more than likely experienced something from those games, from that piece of media. And I feel like I should have included that within the last segment, but it makes more sense to include it now. And that's the fact that with nowadays, like so many interpretations of what you're getting now, but when you have a positive look on something that makes sense to you and you try to explain it to other people, I do encourage people to have that mindset. I do encourage people to encourage other people to look at the other side of things, where it's like these people aren't just making a game for gamers. They're making a game because they get you. They get what you've been through. They understand what people go through. And I know it sounds so cliche, and I know that it's highly against the thoughts and beliefs of the other political side, but that's the reason why we need games like Lost Records. We need studios like Don't Nod, and more specifically, we need story-based driven, choice-based games. Because I don't know about you, but I don't really, there's nothing new to really play, but also I don't have Steam. I'm planning on getting Steam, but I have a PS5. The only games I've been playing are freaking Ghost Recon Wildlands, because my dad's been getting my sister into it, and I've also been going back to Burnout 3. So, and I'm not really excited for the new Tony Hawk game. The only other game that I'm looking forward to is Deliver at All Costs. And there's also that skating game by Devolver Digital, as well as um, that that was a dream game where you like shoot to create things. And another thing that I also wanted to mention was mixtape because I did mention it in my other video talking about Lost Records before Lost Records got released. I don't want to discredit games that tend to fully indulge in the nostalgia aspect or pander to the people that have the nostalgia for those specific eras because everybody has their thing. Everybody does their thing. But I also feel like it's not fair to say that this thing's better than the other thing because it represents the 90s more because you're forgetting the whole point of the game itself. It's not about the era, it's about the characters, it's about the story. It's not about the game. It's about the experience. It's about what you take away from the game. You go into a game with that mindset, you will enjoy the game. I promise. That's all. Peace.
Their feminism propaganda. So what the fuck is this? I guess that somebody are reacting that there are two women. Let me say this: in Brothers there were two guys. In A Way Out there were two guys. In It Takes Two there were one guy, one woman, and now there are two girls and everybody's complaining. Come on, man. I mean, let's face it, man. And it's also like based on my daughters. I don't care what you have between your legs. That's totally not interesting for me. Good characters is what's important.